Hello and welcome to the Gubernatorial debate hosted here at the University of Detroit Mercy. My name is Pantel Savalas and this is Joe Jordan, who will be your co-moderators for this evening. With us tonight we have Mark McFarland with the U.S. Taxpayers Party. We have Paul Hominick with the Green Party and Mary Bazuma with the Libertarian Party. Tonight's debate will consist of both question and answer for the candidates and an open question and answer for the members of the audience. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for an opening statement, following which we will begin posing questions, beginning with Mr. McFarland with the order we decided previous to the starting of this event. Each candidate will be offered a 30-second rebuttal should they choose to take it once the question is posed to the candidate which is given, and you each will get to answer the question in your own right. Okay, so Joe, why don't you start us off with our first question, please?
All right, excellent. Our first topic is education. Our schools are broken in the state of Michigan. Much talk has been made about trying to resolve the problems of public education. Sorry, I messed this up. This is supposed to be opening statements. So yes, Mr. McFarland, would you like to begin?
Okay, thank you. I would like to first thank the university for hosting this and the Philosophy Club. I'm a little conflicted tonight debating these two other candidates. The reason is I have a great deal of respect for them, and the reason for that is that I know what they've been through, running on a major third party with the media. It's a complete blackout. The fix is in, basically. So I want to thank you for your dedication to democracy. I grew up in a rural community, Standish Sterling, about 30 miles north of Bay County. I graduated in 1982 there. In 1987, I went on to Central Michigan University and graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in social psychology. I then went on and I studied under apprentice under FBI agents in Tennessee. I became a licensed private investigator, and today I'm a director of the Central Bureau of Investigation, which is my own agency. We're quite conservative, our platform on social issues. We're for pro-life, we're for traditional marriage, we're for the expansion of open carry of handguns. On the progressive issues, we want to completely legalize cannabis, and we want to return to the 18 drinking age. So you can see that we're very conservative on the social issues, but we have progressive issues also. So that'll be good for right now. I'll leave more time for the questions. Thank you.
Mr. Hominick?
Well, I'm Paul Hominick. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to everybody who worked on putting this together. It is nice to get some media attention and a chance to take a look at our programs. I'm a Green Party member. I got involved with the Green Party because as I looked around at other parties, I found problems with each of them, Democratic and Republican. I couldn't tell the difference anymore and was not getting things done. And there's the old adage about, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I decided that I was definitely not insane, so we needed to do something different. And so I got involved and decided to run for governor. I think we have a real problems in this state, and that in order to resolve them, you have to talk to people of all different kinds of views. Best solutions are found when you take part of one and another part from somebody else and you combine them together, and you can't do that unless you're talking to people. And the Democrats and Republicans don't talk to anyone but themselves anymore. So with that in mind, I wanted to get involved and change the conversation and at least have a chance for different results. Thank you.
Ms. Bazuma?
Thank you so much for having me. This is a great event, and as Paul and Mark said, third-party candidates really get the short shrift. So I appreciate your effort in pulling this together. I was born and raised in Grand Haven, Michigan. I received my Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from Kalamazoo College. I spent 26 years in the U.S. Navy as an intelligence specialist. I spent time in Europe, in the United States, and in the Middle East. I became libertarian because I was very disillusioned with our country's foreign policy and its interventionism into affairs that are not really in our defensive national interest. And also because we learn about being libertarian when we're children. We're taught, don't hit, it's not yours, don't take it, and keep your promises. It teaches us respect for others. Now, if we could only get people to apply it to public policy as well. The power of government is used to force people to live the way others think they should. The government power of taxation, regulation, eminent domain, or asset forfeiture is used to take property that doesn't belong to others. Politicians will promise anything to get elected. They promise to fix the roads, more jobs, quality health care, and world-class schools. Promises the taxpayers can't keep. Libertarians, we remember what our parents taught us. We believe in individual liberty and responsibility. You own yourself and no one else. You have the freedom to think and act as you choose, as long as you don't harm others. Since you own yourself, you own the fruit of your labor. It's not your neighbor's, and it's certainly not Lansing's. Libertarians believe that the highest duty of government is to defend the inalienable rights of the individual, as expressed in our founding documents. Because a government that's limited in its power won't hit you and take your stuff. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. We will move on to our first category, which is education. In the last 4 years, educational funding for public schools in the state of Michigan has been cut by 16.5% from the Grant Home administration. The total dollar number, according to Mark Schauer, the Democratic candidate, that has been lost in education funding is roughly $1 billion. Do you support educational cuts from state funding? If so, why? If not, how do you propose increasing or stabilizing current education funding levels? Mr. McFarland, you have the floor.
Okay. So we have, it seems to be an age-old problem with education, how much it's funded, who's getting the money. I think that the problem lies in the fact that our public schools are controlled by unions. Sure, under federal law, they have the right to collective bargaining, but I think that they are, in a sense, eating out of the public trough, and they need to be responsible. So I think education is funded adequately. I think that we need to make sure that we're not wasting dollars, and we need to hold unions in check. Thank you.
You've done that.
Okay, Mr. Hominick?
Well, there are real issues in education, and the cuts have not helped anything. But I'm not a believer in just throwing money at a problem. You actually have to find out what the problem is and address it. I think the pool of money is big enough, but it's spent badly. We need to take and put the control back into the local school districts. We tell our teachers that you must adapt your teaching styles to the learning styles of your students, which are all different. But then we turn around and say, but we're going to test all your students the same way, and your job depends on them coming out on that test well. We have to give the control back locally. We will get more creativity, more innovation. Programs will be tried that will work, and those will be copied faster than any decree from Lansing or Washington can make it happen. Programs that don't work will get eliminated much more quickly, because other districts will see it and say, no, that's not one we're going to try to reinvent, and go from there. You have to have that innovation and creativity, and you have to have that local control. Every school, that variety and diversity of curriculums and styles is important to a functioning free society, because without that diversity, you all end up with having mediocrity across the board. By having new things come up, you can advance and move ahead. And as far as dealing with,
We're at time.
Mrs. Bazuma.
It's Ms. Sorry. We always hear that, schools need more money, but they never really say how much. Today, spending keeps going up, but the results are sort of flat. Now, if I'm told that I'm to invest more in something, I want a return on my investment. And right now, we're not getting much of a return. I would propose more schools of choice, more non-public schools. I would like to see a scholarship tax credit to be given to low-income children so they can escape a failing public school instead of throwing more money into it. I agree with Paul that schools should be public, but they're not. They're government schools. Return those schools to the public with local control, with school boards, and parents more involved. Right now, with more government control, it's sort of pushing the parents out. So more local control, more schools of choice, a scholarship tax credit to allow low-income children to escape a failing public school.
The next question will be on secondary education. The average Michigan undergraduate student begins their life after their college education roughly between $30,000 to $40,000 in debt from student loans. For graduate and professional students, like medical and law school students, the number can be as high as $150,000 after completion of their respective degrees. Obviously, the higher education model is broken. As governor, would you remedy the situation so new students do not have the same financial burdens as previous students? For graduates with high student loan debt, what would you suggest as a method of reducing their burden? Mr. McFarland?
Okay. So I would propose to the legislature a program where when a student graduates, that they would be able to go to the state under a merit system and get involved in internships working for the state. In that internship, they may not be paid what they would be paid in the private sector, but say over a 3-year period, those loans would be deferred, and those loans would also, there would be a certain percentage that would be wiped clean. Obviously, this comes from state money, but it would be a very useful tool to eliminate that debt for that student.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hominick?
well, the cost of a college education or vocational training has continued to climb. And we really need to start taking a look at how do we reduce the cost rather than where do we find more money. And part of that has to start with looking at administrations in the secondary education and college level. If you look at the last 20 years, the ratio of instructors to students nationwide has stayed average at about 1 instructor for 16 students in the colleges. The ratio of administrators has gone from 1 administrator, by this I'm talking management level folks, to students, which was 20 years ago about 1 for every 64 students, is now down to 1 in about every 32 students. When you look at support staff, that jump has been even greater. So all the growth has really been in the administrative side. And the colleges like to say, well, we've got certain requirements put on us by the federal government that we have to do and complete with. And that's true to some degree. But in many cases, a simple somebody to fill out a report meets the federal requirement, but the colleges have added an entire department just devoted to that. And that needs to be stopped. And we also have to take in the cost of student loans. That's something that Congress has got to work with to bring the interest rates back down. They raised those specifically on student loans. And that's another way that has to be done.
Ms. Bazuma?
Thank you. Stop subsidizing it. Subsidies interfere with market forces that keep the cost of tuition down. There's a college in Michigan called Hillsdale. They do not take any funding, state or federal, and they've managed to keep their tuition at a fairly steady rate. If you keep giving people more money, they may not spend it wisely, as Paul said. They take on more administration. In one college, there's more administrators than there are full-time. They've taken on more administrators than there are more full-time students. Stop subsidizing it. Let colleges deal with the market and be competitive and keep tuition costs low.
Okay, moving on to our next question. The Common Core initiative is spreading rapidly across the country. It has been under scrutiny in the press. Do you support Common Core standards? Why or why not? Mr. McFarland.
This is very simple. I would move that the legislature abolish Common Core in Michigan, completely abolish it, eliminate it, and move the control to the local level. Every district's different. Move that control there. Certainly the state would have some type of guidelines, but yes, I would move to abolish it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hominick.
I'm not a fan of Common Core. I would like to see it eliminated. As I said, back to the local districts to take charge. The Common Core has really basically come about as many companies these days, especially tech companies, have adopted a business model that says, you know, instead of us training our employees, let's have the taxpayers do it. And the Common Core was basically designed to give the same thing across the board, which leads to mediocrity. You got to have that variety.
Thank you. And Ms. Bazuma?
Stop the core. One size, top down, one size fits all set of standards is not always the way to improve education. Kids aren't the same. They learn differently. They learn at different speeds. Putting them all into a classroom with one set of standards is not the way to do it. I agree with my opponents that education should be locally controlled. Also, when politicians, when government starts setting standards, even if they are high standards, fine. But what happens when we're not meeting them? Okay, I guess since it's political now, we're going to lower them. So instead of students performing better, we just dumb it down so they're all performing at a mediocre level.
Thank you, ma'am. And on to our final question on education for this evening. Are you a proponent of homeschooling? Why or why not? If not, what advantage do you see public education having over homeschooling? Mr. McFarland?
I feel as though homeschooling is an option. There needs to be very good guidelines and parameters, but because of certain religious beliefs, I think that people should be able to have that right to do that. Public schools, I think for children add the social element. That's where they develop, that's where they learn. Just like universities, it's not just learning that happens at universities. What happens at universities, just like in K through 12, is you socialize and you find your way. So yes, I think there's a place for that, but there needs to be good guidelines.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hominick?
I like the ideal of homeschooling for those people who want to do that, especially if they're working on a homeschool cooperative where they can get together with other families and share some of those social needs, you know, and also combine resources. I think it's a valid option. I do believe that public education is a responsibility of any free society for its citizens, and that we should be looking at actually making our public education available free on up through college and vocational skills. And that's what we should be moving toward.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Bazuma?
If parents want to homeschool their children, they should be allowed to. I don't know how many of you watch the Scripps Spelling Bee, but count how many finalists are homeschooled. Parents can do a wonderful job in educating their children. They should be allowed to. As far as standards creeping in, I don't know. Like I said, a lot of the homeschool kids I know, They're very, very smart and could probably run rings around some other, some public schools students. No, I think I would, if parents want to, excuse me, if parents want to educate their children, they should be allowed to.
Thank you.
Our next topic is the economy. The state of Michigan has been facing economic hardships for the last couple of years. Cities like Flint and Detroit have been affected the most. Business continues to leave the state of Michigan at an alarming rate, including recently Comerica Bank. As governor, what are your plans for building and growing the state economy? Mr. McFarland.
An important element of a good economy is diversity. Okay, you can't just rely on manufacturing in today's age and think that you're going to do well, because when that manufacturing drops, everything falls apart. And that's what's happened in Michigan. We've relied on the auto industry all these years, but the big three have left. What I would say to the big three is I would say, look, come back to Michigan. And if they don't have the will to come back to Michigan, then I would bring companies here and give them tax subsidies to come here to Michigan and put Michiganders to work. I'd also diversify the economy by the legalization of cannabis. This would bring a lot of jobs. It would also influence tourism. It would bring the needed tax dollars into the coffers to put into education, put into the infrastructure, put into a lot of areas. Thank you.
Mr. Hominick?
Well, I think we need to focus our resources on the businesses that are here in Michigan. There's quite a few of them, especially among the small businesses, which account for most of the employment. We need to take and make capital available for small businesses. I know many small businesses that for lack of 10 or 20 or maybe even as much as $50,000 in capital, they could actually take and double their employees, full-time staff. And that may only be a handful of people, but when you multiply that by thousands of small businesses, it makes a big difference. 72% of our economy is a consumer economy. And what we've done is hurt the consumer between the tax breaks for businesses and going to a part-time workforce. And it's the consumers that are 72% of the economy. If they can't spend money, you're not going to ever get the economy out of things. We need to look at full-time jobs when we take a look at any kind of tax credit. We need to encourage full-time jobs as opposed to part-time. We need to take the folks that are what they conveniently call the long-term unemployed, which they just take off the spreadsheets entirely and say, okay, they don't exist anymore, and actually focus on getting them back to work. Many of them probably have an entrepreneurial bent and could be helped in that way to start more small businesses. But let's focus on what's here in the state.
Ms. Bizuma?
You're going to hear me saying this a lot, but I'm a small government person. Cut the size of government, cut the spending, return that money to the taxpayer. Consumers grow an economy, not governments. And our Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which decides to pick winners and losers in business. They do a lousy job of it. All the promised jobs never really materialize. Like I said, you cannot take money out of an economy to grow an economy. The money is there. Give it back to who earns it so they can spend it. More jobs, more investment, grow.
In post-industrial cities like Detroit and Flint, how do you propose to attract new and growing businesses or industrial corporations back to these cities? Mr. McFarland.
Again, I think the last question, I covered this. We need to bring companies here that will enjoy those tax subsidies so people can be employed. You don't hear about General Motors in China complaining about the wages that they're paying the Chinese. Bring them back. If they don't have the will to come back, then we will bring companies that will employ. Also diversify in the economy. We have to look at the tourism side. We have to look at also the service sector and agricultural. Thank you.
Mr. Hominick?
Well, I am a free enterprise guy. I'm a small business owner, have been for many years in different businesses. But one thing we've forgotten about basic economics is that the money follows the people, not the other way around. And so in the cities that have lost so much population, we need to start bringing people back into there, and the money will follow in many ways. It's a sad thing in a country this size and this wealthy, where we have so many homeless people, and yet we have thousands of houses sitting rotting empty in some of these cities. You know, there needs to be programs created that can put people in those homes and start putting it. And whenever you start building up collections of people, commerce is going to happen. We can certainly do other things to incentivize it, but that's one start.
Ms. Bazuma?
What attracts businesses to cities? Certainly not subsidies and tax breaks. In fact, a lot of businesses would rather pay tax if they'd have just less regulations they'd have to deal with. Detroit right now is highly regulatory. They license too much. Their schools are not the best, and neither are they in Flint. Companies are looking for also cities that manage their resources properly. And right now that's not happening in either Detroit or Flint, but it is getting better. But that's what attracts businesses to a city. Education, safety, but less regulations, less licensing.
In the last 4 years, the Emergency Financial Manager Law has been an extremely controversial bill. In some regards, the EFMs have successfully helped the areas that they have been assigned, but many, including Fred Lee, formerly the EFM of Pontiac, and Joseph Harris, formerly the EFM of Benton Harbor, have used their powers for personal gain to the detriment of the respective cities that they represented. First, do you support the EFM law? Secondly, as governor, how will you handle the economic struggles of the downtrodden cities that have been inflicted with emergency financial managers? Mr. McFarland.
I do not agree with the current law. I think it's heavy-handed. Mr. Snyder basically is a dictatorship involved with this. You hear about Mr. Snyder talking about Detroit. He should really shut his mouth concerning Detroit, because he pushed it into federal bankruptcy, and it's now a federal issue. So what I would do, and this is only one of the areas that I agree with Mr. Mark Schauer on, is that what we need to do is we need to go into those communities and we need to work with those elected officials to change the structure. But one of the biggest problems of what's caused this in Detroit and Flint is the fact that we've had lots of political corruption and unions that are not sustainable in their contracts. So under the current law right now, they can go in and they can nullify union contracts, which is wrong. These are contracts that are legal contracts, and the government, the federal government, has no right to nullify those contracts. So that is wrong. But I would change the way these cities are structured so they are sustainable. Thank you.
Mr. Hominick?
Well, the emergency manager law needs to be removed. Anytime you start taking away people's right to vote, you've destroyed the free society that you're trying to protect. You know, people are people, and they don't always make the best decisions. But in a free society, once you take away the vote, you've defeated the whole purpose of that society. Now, we can talk about unions have this problem and that, but one thing that so seldom gets mentioned is that there's not a single union contract out there that management did not agree to. All right, so why aren't we going after the bad managers if these contracts were so bad? Why are not those managers facing consequences? The unions, you know, didn't act alone. They didn't just run roughshod over. They didn't come in and say, oh, you know, we have the power to do this. You have to take a look at the bad management. And truth of the matter is, a lot of our problems can be fixed simply by putting in good management. Thank you.
Ms. Bazuma?
As a libertarian, I really struggle with this one. Because in the Navy, if you see a ship going towards the rocks, and everybody on the bridge can't come to an agreement as to which way it should go. Sometimes you just got to helicopter in a new pilot and take it farther away from destruction. But why does it have to get to that point anyway? City managers are responsible to their taxpayers for a functional government. And on the other hand, yes, unions, public sector unions, you have the right to collectively bargain. However, that is not an absolute right, because rights come with responsibilities. Are you acting responsibly when it's constantly more, and a city is moving farther and farther to bankruptcy? I would, like I said, sometimes it is necessary, but no, it shouldn't have to come to this. There is a bill right now in the House that I would support. It would give cities more power over collective bargaining so they can say no. And the power to say, you know, maybe we should all go to instead of the defined pension plan, maybe we should go to a defined contribution plan. And it would give them more authority to do so.
Thank you. We'll be moving on to our last question in this section. Michigan has some of the worst roads in the country. How do you propose fixing and improving Michigan's infrastructure?
So what's happening right now, and most Michiganders probably are not aware of this, when you purchase fuel, the tax on that fuel, and when you purchase your license plate and your registration fees, that money is supposed to go to the roads. But they put it into the general fund and they use it for other projects. What I would do is I would earmark that money to go into the infrastructure, to rebuild the roads. I would also take the 6% sales tax. You have to remember there's also a state tax and a federal tax that is placed upon gasoline. But that 6% sales tax, where does it go? It goes into K through 12. I have no idea why that goes to K through 12. That money should still be earmarked for the roads. It should not be going into education. All that money should go into that. So we have enough money. We have one of the highest taxes on fuel in the state. So we have enough money to rebuild the roads. We just have to be smart about it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hominick?
Well, there are short-term and long-term answers there. In the short term, we need to set standards for the roads, both of the construction and their warranties. But we also need to set a simple standard for road salt. We use way too much salt, and any engineer will tell you that it contributes majorly to the deterioration of the roads. If we take a look at what's a good standard to use, we can solve some of that problem. Immediate fixes for some of the roads. We take 2% of the fuel taxes now that are going to the general fund, and we immediately switch those over to infrastructure as a start. And I repeat, just as a start. And we can't take the whole thing out of the general fund at this point because we've already got too many holes in our budget. But we can get that started there. We start demanding warranties and building roads that meet right. And then ultimately, all these issues come back to we need to take and develop a whole new tax structure from scratch. No more adjusting this law or that tax, no more tweaking it here, but actually saying, okay, how do we design a fair and equitable tax system that meets all our needs and start from zero to build that? Thank you.
And Ms. Bazuma?
I was always wondering, some entrepreneurs who would combine chiropractic with car repair. That way, your spine can get aligned as well as your front end. There's plenty of money to fix the roads here. The House cobbled together $450 million out of stuff that wasn't being used. That's a lot of change under the couch cushions. There are a lot of things too we could cut to fix the roads. Like I said, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, $300 million there. Okay, now you got $750 million. All right, the $50 million that's going to the film subsidies. Okay, now what are we up to? $800 million? And if you did, I suppose, want to, have trucks pay a fee because they are very heavy in this state and they do a number on the roads. Maybe there's some more money there. But going out to the back of the Capitol building, to the money tree known as the taxpayer, and shaking it and see what falls out may not be the right solution here.
Thank you, ma'am. We're now going to move on to some questions about healthcare in the state. Healthcare has been a topic in the media for the last few years. Do you support the Affordable Care Act? Will you, as governor, comply with the Federal Health Care Act, and how would you go about trying to ensure that all Michiganders receive proper and affordable health care? Mr. McFarland?
So this would be the first thing that I would do as state governor. I would move the legislature to fight back against the federal government on the Affordable Care Act. It's a bad system. It won't work. It's too expensive. It's not sustainable. What I would do is I would set up a tax structure where the state is responsible for their own health care. And I think that on a federal level, we've made a great mistake. The states, based on population, based on their health care needs, can manage their own health care. We just need the political courage to do it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hominick?
Well, we need to move toward a single-payer, universal health coverage for everybody. That's what the goal needs to be. The law of the land right now is the Affordable Care Act, so certainly it's got some good elements to it, but there's a lot of bad elements. A lot of the bad elements were purposely put in there by Republicans in Congress as a way to try to stop it from getting passed. You know, now they're the ones that are complaining, oh, look at the bad parts of this that we put in there. They usually leave that last part off. But single-payer universal health care is the answer. We can implement parts of what's required now and take it. The theory that, well, we're not going to do the Medicare portion of it because, you know, the government, the feds are going to give us money now, but eventually we'll have to pay that ourselves. Well, gee, when did you suddenly start looking beyond the short term? You know, everything else the legislature here in the state's been looking at is short term. Let's take that money and do what we can with it while we move toward a single payer system.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Mazuma?
We have to take a look at the problem here. First of all, the Affordable Care Act is not about health care. It's about insurance. And even if you have insurance, you're not guaranteed health care. What makes health care expensive? Well, a lot of it has to do with the government. In Michigan, we have something that's called a certificate of need, which means that if your city or township or whatever wants to build a hospital with some brand new equipment, they have to go to the state and ask permission. Why? Get rid of certificates of need, you save 10% right there. I worry with Medicaid expansion because it's going to start crowding out people who really need it. My sister is disabled. She is on Medicaid. Right now, to see her eye doctor, it takes twice the amount of time than it did before because there are more people now in the system. Keep that for those who are truly needy. Also, like I said, market forces in healthcare can bring costs down if only we would get rid of the 9,000-pound gorilla in the room that is known as government.
I think
Thank you.
if I could have a rebuttal to,
Yes, sir.
to the
30 seconds.
system. I think that we have to look at how this was financed. This was financed close to, I believe, $700 billion that was raped from the Medicare fund. They took from that fund. So for the aged in this country, do we have any responsibility to them? I believe we do. To take $700 billion, it's unconscionable.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hominick, would you like to offer a rebuttal?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to another healthcare question. Nursing is a growing and emerging field in the state and nationwide. However, many hospitals are facing shortages of nurses on rotation during shifts. The State House and Senate have proposed a bill called the Safe Patient Care Act, which will require all hospitals to have a mandatory number of nurses on staff during any given shift and for any given condition of patients. Do you support this act as governor, will you enforce publicly funded hospitals to maintain appropriate nursing staffs? Mr. McFarland.
Well, obviously, you need adequate staff in a hospital. It's a responsibility. I think we need to take the profit, in a sense, out of it. You know, nurses are highly paid. It's a job that's a difficult job to do. There's also people underneath those nurses' aides that work long hours for very little money. So I think we need a system where people are not going into nursing strictly for the money. They need to go into nursing because this is what they like to do. So I think there is a critical problem there, that you have these professions that are chasing after the money. That's the reason why the Affordable Care Act, why almost every doctor in this land is against it, because of the profits. So in that way, the Affordable Care Act does take care of that, but we need to look at how sustainable our healthcare system is.
Thank you. Mr. Hominick?
Well, we can certainly do a lot to encourage people going into the nursing field, whether that's tuition credits and other areas there. But the nursing schedules at most hospitals are not based on what's providing the most or the best health care for the patients. They're based on what makes the most profit for the company that owns the hospitals. And those schedules where you've got nurses that work the 48 hours on and then 36 hours off and a variety of other odd schedules, you know that's not going to provide good health care, because nobody who's that tired is going to be at their best. But it's designed to basically let them limit what they pay and how many they have to pay in those full-time structures. We need to have nursing be revamped across the board to have reasonable shifts at reasonable pay that can be cycled through so that everybody comes on and does a full day's work at their best level.
Thank you. And Ms. Bazuma?
If there are a shortage of nurses, and there probably are, then we have to stop with the over-licensing. Over-licensing creates shortages. It really takes a long time and a lot of effort and a lot of passing of government regulation licensing to become a nurse. Advanced practical care nurses right now, it's being fought in the legislature against their ability to write a prescription. Advanced practical care nurses. These are highly qualified, highly trained individuals. They could help out in areas where there are doctor shortages right now, like in rural communities. So yeah, let's stop the over-licensing of nursing.
Thank you. Moving on, we're going to talk about some social issues.
In September of 2011, Governor Snyder signed a bill that cut families that have received state financial assistance through welfare programs after 48 months. For some families, these welfare programs have been the life support needed to sustain livelihood. Do you support welfare reduction? If so, why? If not, what would you do in order to increase or maintain current welfare programs and funding? And Mr. McFarland?
I think it's a good start. You have to set parameters. There are people that need aid from the state, but then there are also people that are abusing the system. You see it every day. So what you have to do is try to separate those out, and so you need a system of proper investigators to make sure that there isn't the fraud that we see in the system. So setting a time, you can do that, but you also have to provide some type of training, and you have to provide the jobs. You can't just simply say, well, you know, you're not working, but we don't have enough jobs in the state. So you have to be able to get the unemployment rate to a sustainable level, to a level that's adequate, and you need to provide training. You can't just take the aid away and these people would end up on the street.
Mr. Hominick?
Well, I support welfare reduction through creating more jobs and opportunities for everybody. All right. But our failure to help our friends and our neighbors when they need it, is one of our greatest failures as a society. Discounting and throwing away the poorest among us has led to an I got mine mentality, where we no longer want to look out for the other guy. And we need to look out for each other. We're in this together. Yes, there are people who abuse the system, who try to live off the system as such, want to make their living on the system. They're not a majority by any means. They're very few, and most of those become career politicians. The majority of people, they don't want to be on welfare. They want to have an opportunity to get back, to care for their own families, to live their own lives, to have those freedoms that we all enjoy without having to worry about where's my next meal coming from. So, if we cannot support our own people, our friends and neighbors, then we've got a bigger failure than any politician's ever going to fix.
Ms. Bizuma.
We've spent trillions of dollars on the war on poverty, and we're no close to winning it than we were in 1965. Is it because we're lifting more people out of poverty, or are we making poverty more comfortable for people? That's not right. Welfare systems create a poverty in spirit in all of us. If Dickens had been alive today and was writing A Christmas Carol, I wonder if he would have had Ebenezer Scrooge say, are there no food stamps? Is there no Section 8 housing? And of course, we still have plenty of prisons if we'd stop locking up people, non-violent drug offenders, which is another circle of poverty right there. I believe in making government smaller, taking less money out of your pocket, so maybe we'd have more money to fund private charities who do a good job and are more responsible with their funds.
I'd like to just comment a little bit about what Paul said. I think he's right on in the sense that these cases are very few that are really taking advantage of the system. Most people do want to be productive in society and provide for their families and live a comfortable life. So I would just like to clarify that.
Michigan is one of only 20 states that does not currently allow same-sex couples to marry. Michigan is one of 11 states that have defined marriage as between one man and one woman. The courts have struck this definition down as being unconstitutional. However, pending appeal, same-sex marriage is still illegal in Michigan, and Governor Snyder has vowed to fight it at all costs. Do you support same-sex marriage? As governor, would you support allowing same-sex couples to legally marry in the state? Mr. McFarland.
Okay, Mr. Snyder has been pretty cryptic about this. He won't ever make a comment on it. I think that it is unconscionable that we have a federal judge make a decision 10 years later. In 2004, the people of this state spoke very clear. Millions of people voted on this, that marriage is between a man and a woman. And as governor, I would fight this through the courts. We will not back down on this issue. Thank you.
Mr. Holliday.
It should be legal right now. There never should have been a Defense of Marriage Act and any of its variations around. The state really has no vested interest in who marries who, and it shouldn't be a situation there gets involved. And as far as, in a democracy, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes people make bad decisions. Those same folks that you can say a majority of who voted, not a majority of the state, but a majority of who voted, passed the constitutional amendment here in Michigan. But there was a time when they also passed laws that said black people couldn't vote. And there's a lot of other bad laws that have passed, and when the time came, people moved away from them and changed them. That's one of the great things about democracy. It is self-correcting, and it's time to correct this.
Ms. Bizuma.
Coming together in a contract of love and caring is a fundamental human right. It doesn't matter who you are. As governor, I would take it one step farther. I want to end marriage licensing laws. Think about it. A license is the government's permission to do something that is otherwise illegal. Marriage, illegal. You know that pastors and priests and other clergymen can be put in jail if they marry somebody without our government's permission. That is ridiculous. Return marriage to its proper realm. The church, the temple, the mosque, or in the hearts of the two adults who are committed to each other.
Rebuttal to this. I guess what I'd ask Ms. Bazuma is that I'd wonder throughout the world what religious tradition agrees with this, agrees with same-sex marriages. I know that the Vatican recently, with the discouragement of a lot of bishops, conservative bishops, that are saying, where is the church moving here? Because for thousands of years, we have had a value system that defines marriage. Are we going to deconstruct this based on a media-driven Hollywood? Thank you.
We have separation of church and state in this country. If the Catholic Church does not want to marry a same-sex couple, they shouldn't have to. Neither should any other church if they don't want to. What I'm saying is that if people do want to come together in a contract, a marriage contract, they should be able to. But you don't force churches to marry people.
Mr. Hominick, would you like to respond?
Well, you know, there's an agreement there that you don't force people to marry somebody, but there's plenty of opportunity if we take away these laws for people to get married, whether it's in their own church or in their own civil, way to do that. I think talking about it, marriage between a man and a woman being around for thousands of years, is probably not actually quite accurate and true. There's been a lot of other forms of marriage throughout time and history. You know, even among some Islamic cultures, you know, multiple wives are involved. And
Multiple husbands.
in the past, so there's been a very large number of combinations, you know. So I don't think relying on a historical track record is a good way to make that decision.
But my dispute is not between multiple spouses. And my dispute is if we open this up, do you know right now that Michigan will not allow marriage between first cousins? Are we going to open that up? There's 20 states that allow it. There's all 50 states that allow a second cousin marriage. So do we open this up? Do we open a marriage between maybe an individual and their pet? Really, we can open these questions up. Where do we stop this as a society?
How do you enter into a contract with your pet?
It must be a smart pet.
Now, like I said, end marriage licensing laws. The government has no authority to say to tell people whether to be married or not. It's with the individuals. And we're never going to agree on this, Mark, so I think we should just kind of call this a military, political demilitarization.
Marriage licenses are between the state. It's a marriage license between the state. So it's not, churches two people can go to a church and get married. So.
Well, we respect all of your opinions, but as Ms. Bazuma said, this seems to be a bit of a hot issue too. So best let us leave that alone. And when we open the floor for the audience to ask questions, should they choose, if this comes up again, please feel free to elaborate. Moving on to a different set of social issues. Michigan has a high number